They replaced the sensors. They replaced the fuel system. One dealership even told the owner to just sell the car and move on. But the strange part? Every time this car died on the highway, it would restart 30 seconds later like absolutely nothing happened. For nearly 2 years, nobody could explain it. Not 4 mechanics, not 3 dealerships, not even the diagnostic computers. And what finally caused the problem was something so small, so hidden that most people would never even think to look for it. This is the story of the car nobody could repair. There's a belief, almost sacred in American car culture, that any problem has a solution. That somewhere between a skilled pair of hands and enough time, every broken machine can be made whole again. It's the foundation of every garage, every shop, every grease-stained manual ever written. But then there are the cars that make you question all of it. This is the story of a 2004 Chevrolet Malibu, silver, 4-door, unremarkable in every way a car can be unremarkable, that became the single most confounding vehicle 4 mechanics in Middle Tennessee would ever put their hands on. A car that stalled without warning on open highways, idled perfectly in the driveway the next morning, and sent diagnostic computers spinning in circles. A car that, for nearly 2 years, absolutely no one could fix. And the reason it couldn't be fixed? Nobody in that part of the world had ever seen anything quite like it. Robert Hale was 53 years old when he bought the car. He wasn't a gearhead. He wasn't the kind of man who haunted junkyards on weekends or subscribed to motor magazines. He was a high school football coach in a small town called Lewisburg, and he needed reliable transportation to cover the 60-mile round trip to away games his team played on Friday nights. The Malibu was clean, low mileage, and reasonably priced. He paid cash and drove it home proud. For the first 4 months, it was perfect. Smooth acceleration, quiet highway cruising, nothing to complain about. Then, one Thursday evening in October, on a stretch of US 431 with no cell service and no shoulder worth stopping on, the car simply died. No warning lights, no sputtering, no hesitation. The engine cut like someone had flipped a switch. Robert coasted to a stop. He sat there for a moment, the kind of silence that feels loud after 70 miles per hour. He turned the key. The car started immediately. He drove home, confused but unsuspecting. He figured it was a fluke. People always figure it's a fluke. It wasn't a fluke. Over the following 3 months, the Malibu died 7 more times. Always on the highway, always at speed. Always in stretches where stopping was inconvenient or outright dangerous. And every single time, it restarted within 30 seconds like nothing had happened. Robert brought it to the first mechanic, a well-regarded shop in town that had been operating since the late 80s. The owner, a man named Gene, had built his reputation on not being stumped. He plugged in his scan tool, pulled codes, found nothing definitive, cleared the memory, and sent the car back out with a new crankshaft position sensor installed, just to rule it out. The car died again the following Friday. Back it came. Gene dug deeper. Fuel pressure, ignition timing, grounds and connections, everything checked out. He replaced the camshaft sensor. He inspected the wiring harness for chafing. He called a friend who specialized in GM systems. His friend had no answer either. After 6 weeks and nearly $800, Gene told Robert something he had never told a customer in 30 years of wrenching. He told him he didn't know what was wrong with it. That's the moment a car stops being just a car and becomes something else entirely. Something personal. Because it wasn't just about money anymore, though the money was real and mounting. It was about the particular helplessness of owning something that worked perfectly most of the time, and then, without rhyme or reason, betrayed you completely. At 65 miles an hour, in the dark, on a road where nobody was coming to help. Robert's wife wanted him to sell it. His brother-in-law offered to take it off his hands for what the parts were worth. His principal, with the gentle impatience of someone who has watched too many avoidable problems drag on, suggested he simply buy something else and move on. Robert wasn't built that way. He took the car to the Chevrolet dealership in Columbia. The service department ran a full diagnostic sweep, consulted GM's technical service bulletins, and identified a known issue with the body control module communication on that model year. They reflashed the ECU software and assured him the problem was resolved. They charged him $420 and 2 days of his life. 3 weeks later, on a Friday night, coming home from a playoff game his team had won by a field goal, the Malibu died again. He was 40 miles from home. It was 38 degrees. He sat on the side of the road for 20 minutes, running the heat in 30-second bursts, too stubborn to call anyone. A second dealership, then a third shop, then an independent specialist who drove up from Huntsville, Alabama, specifically because Robert had called him 4 times. Each one came, each one tried, each one left without an answer. The car accumulated diagnoses the way some people accumulate regrets. Numerous, overlapping, and ultimately none of them quite right. It was Robert's neighbor, a retired electrician named Darnell, who finally asked the question nobody else had thought to ask. Does it always happen at highway speed? Robert thought about it. Yes, always between 55 and 70, never in town, never in the driveway, never idling. Darnell asked another question. Does it ever happen when it's cold? Robert started to say no, and then he stopped. Because it hadn't. Every single incident had happened between May and October, not once in winter, not once in early spring. Darnell crawled under the car with a flashlight and spent 45 minutes in silence. What he found wasn't in any service bulletin. It wasn't flagged by any scan tool. It was a section of the fuel vapor return line, a thin, almost inconsequential piece of rubber that had developed a pinhole crack at a bend point near the rear axle. In cold weather, the crack stayed shut. In warm weather, at highway speed, with the line pressurized and flexing at the resonant frequency the chassis produced above 55 miles per hour, it opened just enough to drop fuel pressure below the threshold the injectors needed to maintain combustion. The engine management system, seeing no catastrophic fault, logged nothing, threw no codes, sent no warnings. The car simply stopped, the line relaxed, and when Robert turned the key 30 seconds later, everything was normal again. A $12 rubber line. A crack you couldn't see without knowing exactly where to look and what you were looking at. 2 years, 4 mechanics, 3 dealerships, thousands of dollars. $12. Robert still drives the Malibu. He told me he thought about getting rid of it 100 times, and each time he talked himself out of it, and he's not entirely sure he can explain why. Maybe because giving up on a machine that still had life in it felt like a habit he didn't want to form. Maybe because fixing something nobody else could fix carries a satisfaction that's hard to replicate with anything that comes easy. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe he just liked the car. What this story really is, underneath all the stalled engines and diagnostic confusion, is a lesson in the thing that separates the mechanics who become legends from the mechanics who become cautionary tales. It isn't the scan tools, and it isn't the certifications. It's the willingness to ask the question the data isn't answering, to look at what something is doing, not just what it's reporting. Every car has a truth. Most of them are waiting for someone patient enough to hear it. The car nobody could repair is still out there, covering 60 miles of country road every Friday night, running clean, running quiet, running exactly like it always should have.